So the last spaces of the table end in 2024, sorry, 224. See. And that black space 224 falls on the head or on the top of element LA. Let's share the table. We know this, but it's always good to just look at it. So here, right? These four last lines correspond to lap 14. And then we have 224 on top of LA. So Alejandra always says that, right? We finish routing these spaces so that we have the chance to nourish that interpreter, hopefully solar interpreter, right? So that what comes later, the next laps after lap 14, we have a brand new interpreter, okay? Solar interpreter. So here we are. Right now is day 227. So we are going through this space. But also this one, right? Remember, I think Alejandra this year, she is going to go over a lot of the concepts of the table that she hasn't gone through, right? She's like explaining it as we go through it. So we have 227 here and we have 227 here, right? So uh, I think these two are related. Okay. And of course, this one too. So all of these are going to be always related because they come from, we know that this is a clone of this 7. Line 7 is a clone of line 8. And line 9 is a mix of line 7 and 8. Okay, so all of these three will always be related to each other. And of course, we also have these two that are also mixes. So but I honestly I don't have that fresh in my mind. I think Alejandra will be explaining it in the red program of lab 15. I think she's explaining a little bit more of the table. So another thing today is the anniversary of the removal of the gold standard. Remember that the gold standard was removed on August 15 of 1971, which is how many years? 54 years. So it has been 54 years since the removal of the gold standard today. So that's what we have here, right? Um, so she begins talking about how this lab 13 has been very revealing, right? Because we found out several metrics in relation to, she talks about Justo José de Urquiza. This is the first constitutional president of Argentina. And she was, for a lot of years, partner and a romantic relationship with Guillermo Urquiza, which is the descendant of him, right? And Alejandra says that Justo José de Urquiza is a really good architect at a molecular scale, which Alejandra says that she's not very good at that. Like that is not her area of expertise. And we can see very clearly this, that Alejandra is clearly has an expertise in the area of the subatomic scale, but not on the other scales. So the other scales she has to learn. But this is we can see how synchronic this is, how organized it is, how step by step this whole process has been, especially for Alejandra because it has touched every single scale for her, like one by one. And right now she is like working at a personal scale as well as all of the others. When before she was probably just functioning at the level of the structures and that was it. Like when it all began, right? So we have seen how um just the process has been adjusting scale by scale and expressing itself and organizing itself. So here she explains that it is very important that we know the difference between calendaria and the Gregorian calendar. The difference is that the Gregorian calendar does not have this differentiation between the 22 laps, which has to do with the documentation at a social level, at a social scale, and the Ring of Fire has to do with the solar scale, right? And these two algorithms function separately but complementary. But we do have to separate them to be able to just provide the solar consciousness to do what it needs to do, right? So that these things are separated. Um, so we purposely and intentionally separate these two algorithms because the solar responsibilities follow an algorithm and the social documentation that supports each local year follows another algorithm. So the difference between calendaria and Gregorian calendar is that the Gregorian calendar has 12-month division, right? And there's a fusion between the solar aspect and the social aspect. So if we do not realize the difference, we cannot observe the different ranges syncing, right? Synchronizing. So calendaria is created to separate this so that the social aspect, the human experience, the document, it is separated from the observer that can structure it from the subatomic scale, right? So we separate the social aspect from the observer so that the observer can structure it from the subatomic scale, from the antimatter. So in calendaria, one of the algorithms will be responsible for the order docs. Remember in the musical notes, we have order list, order docs, and then documents, digital origin, right? So one of the algorithms in Calendaria will be responsible for order docs, the order and the memory of our experiences inside the container, which is the unit of memory that orbits the third orbital of the solar system, where our third dimensional life is being developed, which is planet Earth, right? When Alejandra says the unit of memory that orbits the third orbital, that is Earth. That is the planet, because the planet is the unit of memory of the third orbital, which is where our third dimensional existence develops. Another critical point that Calendaria has that is different than the Gregorian calendar is the separation of the four clocks. Alejandra also calls the Ring of Fire the four clocks, right? The four clocks of every year in the apparatus. Then we have that 366 day of the last year as the base of those four clocks in each apparatus, each Ring of Fire. So these three clocks are the last 13 days of the 4 years of an apparatus. These 13 days have a backup inside the context of our star, which is day 366. Day 366 is the backup for our star because Sol is learning to create materialization code, and Sol uses that extra day to create that code for materialization. It is like a supplementary day, which would be the 31st of December of the Sida year. So this lap 13 is the lap 13 of year 12 of the LGC signal. So which means that in 2026, lap 13 we will have a lap 13 of year 13 of the development, right? Which is an assimila year, an assimilation year. And this is an assimilation that's going to be purely solar. And this is an assimilation that will be completely according to the solar scope or reach. So the really revealing thing that Alejandra said that happened in lap 13, because this red is lap 14, so she's talking about lap 13, right? Okay, so the 25th of July, for the Mayans, This was something that was cooked in the 7011 group chat, okay? The 25th of July, in the Mayan culture, they call it the day outside of time because the way they measure time is a very complicated way. It is a very complicated way. They have like three different measures of time and they coordinate these three different measures of time, etc. So to coordinate a shift from one year to the next, they have to leave out the 25th of July to have, a coordination in the way they measure time. So they have that day and it's called the day outside of time. Um, so Alejandra completely changes, like updates that concept, and she calls the 25th of July the day inside space. Instead of calling it the day outside of time, she says, I'm gonna add something to that. I'm gonna add the day inside space. So the 25th of July, 25 of the 7th, is the logical circuit of the observer. 25/7, logical circuit of the observer. This is the day 14 of lab 13. Okay. The logical circuit of the observer comes from antimatter and prints what it is being observed, and that is what provokes the gravitational effect. So see how she's making this reading of um, logical circuit of the observer, and then she relates that to the gravitational effect. Why? Because we are reading 7 in this context. So in this context, 7 is related to the observer and it's also related to the gravitational effect. So when 7 is gravitational, it's because 7 is agrees to what is being observed. When 7 is gravitational, is because 7 agrees with what is being observed. And when 7 is the logic of the observer, it determines the range or the focus of what is being observed. So let's say that again. When 7 is the logic of the observer, that is what will determine the focus of what is being observed. And when 7 is gravitational, it's because 7 agrees with what it's being observed. So, we can write that down and look at it, just reason it a little bit slowly because there's a lot there. So 25 of the 7th is a code, of course. The unified field requires an update every year, and when we all update individually, we have to map again the whole of the collective. So to be able to map the collective all over again, that's why we have day 14 of lab 13. Another thing that happened on that specific day is that in the global quarantine marker, we had 4667. 4667 is the frequency of the 13 positions of the ring of fire added together, right? We can see right here. The 13 positions of the ring of fire added together adds up to 4667, right? That's why Alejandra, begins to talk about that. So, you know, so much. So all of this is it's an anticipation or preparation that Calendaria provides for us. It is a training of the processor of signals to be able to anticipate and structure the observer, feeding the interpreter before the interpretation. Right? So all of this that we're doing has to do with us exercising, training our processor of signals to be able to anticipate so that the observer can structure and feed the interpreter before the interpretation is made. So if I can nourish the interpreter with all of these variables before executing the interpretation, that interpretation will have, when the interpretation is actually made, the interpretation will be with a proper charge. It will not have less charge or more. It will have just what it needs. The proper charge. Okay, so here's where she talks about the day inside space, right? They call it the day outside of time. Well, she adds the day inside of space. Because if it's outside of time, but it's inside of space, it's because that day has the quality of a spatial consciousness. Because it's the logical circuit of the observer, right? So that day has a connotation of a spatial consciousness because it's a day outside of time, but it is a day inside of space. Another thing that happens on that day is that Javier Milei, which is the person that has the public social role of president of parameter code, not parameter. When we say parameter, it has to do with the solar system. When we say code, it has to do with third orbital. So he's the representative of code 54, which is Argentina, right? So on that day, Javier Milei has 20,000 days of life. And Alejandra has 2032 days of life, right? So Alejandra says, this is what is determining the change in the rules of the global interaction, right? When we talk about Milei, we're talking about a role that he occupies, social public role, corporate role. And every time that we're talking about a country, we are talking about a collective consciousness, right? So when we are referencing to Javier Milei, we're talking about the specific role that he carries in Code 54 in relation to the collective consciousness, right? Collective consciousness is SE cardinality. Unified field is everything in the SE cardinality. The rest of the cardinalities are private. The only public cardinality is the unified field, and that responds to the SE cardinality. Okay. Okay, so when we're looking at lab 14, we have like we said in the beginning, we are ending of the transit of the spaces in black in the table. The last 16 spaces in black correspond to lab 14. So what is lab 14 with the perception of someone else that isn't me, right? It is the third lab that has to do with the others that are not myself. So if the perception of someone else that is not me is regulated in its three parameters that are its essential parameters, which is 1, 4, and 7, we have the chaos and control parameter. Here she is alluding to Justo José de Urquiza's days of life on that day, which we're going to see later. She doesn't name them there. But she says, if the perception of the other is regulated in its three essential parameters, which is 1, 4, and 7, remember she's talking about the three private spaces that we have, the three cardinalities that we have private, right? If those three parameters are regulated, then we have a protocol of chaos and control because I am the other's other as well. So if I am regulated and the other is regulated, we have a protocol of chaos and control. So they are recording this emission on day 209, which is in the SO cardinality of lab 14, which is step 26 of the promise of the Togane Son, right? Okay. So something that happened on August 12th, 2025, right, which is day 224, 12th of August. What is the 12th of August? That is the day where everything related to the program, um, everything related to the program that the memory of this planet has already recorded. Okay, that is the 12th of August has to do with everything that the planet has already recorded and programmed. Okay, according to what? According to everything that we have perceived, everything that we have done, it is as if there was like a computerized tomography. The container is auditing us constantly. Um, so she says, what happened with Alejandra? What did Alejandra do in Peru? What does Peru do to Alejandra? Peru provides the next step of the instruction. And what is that next step about? It is about instructing about the container. Like the next step for the instruction has to do with learning and teaching about the container, which is everything that Alejandra has been learning from January to July of 2025. And all of those things have to do with parameters of the container, right? The financial order, the judicial order, because these are not variables of the people. They are variables of the frames. They are still variables of the frames, but they are variables that specifically have to do with the unified field, right? Why? Because the fourth cardinality is the only cardinality that is a public space. And because it is public, it needs regulations, right? Because in our private spaces, we can regulate ourselves. But the public space also needs regulations, and those regulations are provided by the frames themselves, right? So Alejandra here very briefly uses this image, right? And she explains that NE, the NE cardinality, is the financial quadrant, and NO is the judicial quadrant. And then in SO, we will see how we manage these conditionals to be able to apply those conditionals in the unified field, SE, okay? So NE is the financial quadrant, NO is the judicial quadrant, and SO, we will see how we manage those conditionals to apply them in the unified field, right? So if we have if we have in our sight these space-temporal structures, we have a neutral entering into the unified field. We want to be able to enter the unified field through the neutral, right? So what does the neutral ingressing into the unified field do? What does it do? What does the neutral do? If it makes it so that the observer is guided by the structures. It's able to adjust the antenna. And if it enters in the neutral, all of the scales are adjusted, right? Okay, so the neutral, remember, is in the NO cardinality, right? The observer. So the observer enters if the observer enters the SE cardinality from the neutral, it's going to be able to adjust the antenna, and it's going to be able to have in sight all of the structures, not just the personal, right? Because if I am entering only from the personal, if I am interpreting everything only from the personal, everything is going to be distorted. Everything's like the signal is not going to be received cleanly, right? But if I enter from the neutral, I am going to be including all of the scales. I'm going to be adjusting the antenna. But for me to be able to do this, I need to have the concepts that allow me to separate each scale, right? Which we should have at this point. Um, how's everyone doing? Because I'm not looking at you. Okay. All right. Um, so between the magma of the Earth and the ionosphere, we have the dialogue of the neutrals. So that in the middle, dialogue of the neutrals, ionosphere and magma, okay? Dialogue of the neutrals. For what? So that in the middle, the memories, which are our documental profile, and the signals in our antenna profile captation, anticipation can happen. Okay? So between magma and ionosphere, we have the documental profile and the flow of signals, right? In the antenna. In the middle, we have also that. So all of this is happening. We sequence as best as we can, and we go from the neutral all the way to the partial, right? Because it is not that the partial is wrong and the neutral is better. No, 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 no. It's just the sequence. Like we have to enter from the neutral and work our way to the partial, not enter the unified field directly on the partial, because the partial is always fragmented. Like the focus of the partial will always be fragmented. It's gonna depend on the preferences. We all have preferences, right? But that's gonna depend on like the demands of the SE cardinality. Like what am I doing in the SE cardinality specifically? Because sometimes I'm gonna have to use the partial specifically for a specific function inside the unified field, but not always. It's gonna depend on what I am doing, like the functions that I am fulfilling inside the unified field that are gonna define which position I'm gonna use and how and for what. So sesgo, I have to see bias. Okay, bias, right? Or inclination or preference is the same thing as focus. So if I am only looking at the unified field from my preferential focus, okay, I am always going to be limited to that. That is because the licenses of the last link have preferences, okay? And they execute those preferences, and they can interpret whatever they want about whatever they want because they have those licenses. And this is a permit that is provided by defect because it is the last link. It is the scale of the last link. So the last link has those licenses. But because the last link has this exclusive benefit of having those licenses, that's also a problem. Because if we use those criteria to manage the observer has to be neutral, right? We cannot manage the observer with our partial preferences because the observer has to do with other frames that have nothing to do with preferences, right? So if we do that, if we manage the observer with our preferences, then everything will be a distortion. So what we want is when we enter the unified field, we add layers, one layer and another layer and another layer of neutrality to the partial position until we reach the pure neutral, which would be the inferior tip of the SE cardinality, which is this one right here. Right here, which corresponds to the entorno, right? So she says, adding layers of neutrality because we are entering from the neutral. So we enter over here, neutral. And then we work our way to the personal, slowly, layer by layer, but we reach that place from the neutral, okay? How are you guys doing? Because this is a little bit, yeah? Is it making sense? Yeah? Okay. So we are adding different layers of neutrality to the partial position until we reach the neutral, the pure neutral. Okay. Thank you, Marjolaine. Which is the pure neutral is the tip that has to do with the entorno in the SE cardinality. Okay. Why? Because it is mirroring, right? The no is mirroring in on. Remember that there's a mirror there. So the observer in the NO cardinality is hyperneutral. And there's going to be a hyperneutralized field in the SE cardinality if this happens. If it's not hyperneutralized, it's hyper-personalized. And this is like the main issues that we are having in the SE cardinality. The field is hyper-personalized. Because we cannot differentiate anything. Everything is all mixed up. But
Yeah.
if we are entering from the neutral and we work our way to the partial, then it is completely different than if we just insert ourselves in the SE cardinality directly on the preferences. Um, mm, mm. Okay, so lab 14 has the 12th of August at the end, right? So she says, what is the 12th of August? It is the fixing of the external source of the octave. 12 external source, 8 octave. It's going to end up fixing, it's going to finish fixing the external source of the octave because it's going to give us the chance to nourish the interpreter and make a transformation in like online because we are completing the 224 spaces and we are entering on the 2025 the 225. 225 is outside the field. It is an observer, it is a fifth dimension observer managing all of the circuits. 225, it is a fifth dimensional observer managing all the circuits outside of the box. Okay, so fifth dimension has a kind of like free pass. The fifth dimension does not need a program destiny. It doesn't have those limitations because it fixes everything directly with, like, it works things directly with the unified field. A fifth dimensional observer fixes things directly with the unified field. It doesn't have the limitations of a program destiny and all these other limitations of a third dimensional observer, right? So the fifth dimensional observer does not work with people or with program destinations or the contents. It works directly with the container. So, if all of these 12 years you have not been interested in the logic of the container because it is not of a social order, it is of a solar order, the container cannot classify you in an exclusive line. This is so interesting. If you have not been interested in the logic of the container these last 12 years, then the container cannot classify you in an exclusive line. It's going to classify you in a massive line. And that massive line has to do with stereotypes. So all of these things have been hyper subtle signals that if the antenna is, available, it takes the instruction, it prepares the construction of concepts that act as the early detectors of those signals, right? The concepts, the preparation of the concepts act as early detectors of these hyper subtle signals. So this was also really amazing because as third dimensional people, we really like experience, right? That's the third orbital action. We like experience. But LGC has nothing to do with that. So Ale says that LGC will always be instructing us about things that never became experiences in the plane. LGC will always be instructing us about the things that never became experiences in the plane. Why? Because we have the capacity to work with all of these things in the cone. And if it's not necessary for them to materialize, they won't, because they are sometimes are just dilemmas. And if we have that capacity to work with the dilemma at the level of the cone, then it doesn't impact unnecessarily breaking the synchronicity of the unified field. Because LGC does not work with four cardinalities, it works with three. Because if we add the fourth cardinality, we add the collective memory. LGC does not need that. But if we subtract the collective memory with what we work with the particular antenna, and the particular antenna captures whatever is next for the collective in a neutral format. If we subtract the collective memory, we work with the particular antenna, and the particular antenna captures whatever is next for the collective in a neutral format. So we are neutralizing things before they impact the collective memory. This neutral format allows an adjustment so that when it reaches the last link, the personal area, it is perfectly integrated, right? All of the scales are integrated. Okay, now she starts talking about Justo José de Urquiza, right? She's saying that this is a really amazing architect at the level of the molecular scale. Um, so with this solar training, Alejandra has been able to see and learn this adjustment of scale in his direct descendants, okay? And she says that this is what someone from the molecular scale does, an architect of the molecular scale. Um, the first constitutional president of Argentina, Justo José de Urquiza. Argentina is a collective that has in its charge the variable 54 of the ionosphere. And one of the qualities of this variable 54 is the regulation of the collective field, which is the collective memory, right? That's why Javier Milei has 20,000 days on that day. Um, okay, now here she shows, we can see here, the days of life of Justo José de Urquiza on the 12th of August of 2025, which is day 224, the last black space in the table. So remember when she said, if the other who isn't me is able to regulate the three essential aspects of itself, we have a chaos. This is where she made that reading from. The days of life of Justo José de Urquiza, okay? We have 174 inside of 8 and 8. Okay, so we have 1 8 to the right, 1 8 to the left. We know that this is the protocol of chaos and control. But in the middle, we have the integration of the receiver in the anatomic, molecular, and subatomic field because we have 1, 7, and 4. But we have the subatomic field, we have it in the middle because it's not 147, it's 174. And the 7 is inside 1 and 4. It's in the middle. Why? Because the subatomic scale can change interactions without destroying the position. Like the subatomic instance, the subatomic scale can do whatever it wants. It can go anywhere in time, and it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't have those restrictions and those regulations that we have in the anatomic, right? So the subatomic scale is a logic that is not from this plane. But this plane fully respects what is based in, because the origin of this scale is the subatomic. So it respects it completely. So 174 is also the left of our beloved calculator. And we have three different scales: anatomic, molecular, and subatomic. We have the transformation of those three scales. Because inside this protocol of chaos and control, all three scales are contemplated. In Alejandra's case right now, she is now trying to use all of the frictions, all of the disruptive issues in her own life, all the faults that we have in the anatomic scale. And she said that she is learning to make readings because she has to know how to regulate the antenna. But right now she is pointing towards the molecular scale, which is something that has to be responsible for the scale of the clan. Okay, so she's like now learning about the molecular scale. So she has Justo José de Urquiza as a reference. She finds these days of life on the 14th day of lap, I mean 16th day of lap 14. And she says that Justo José de Urquiza is her master teacher in what the molecular design would be. Okay. So she says again what she has explained when she went to visit him and the when he published that book, etc. And she says, what has this architect achieved? That architect has achieved a weaving, a construction inside a community. This is what an architect does at a molecular scale, create community. But she says what I value the most is that Guillermo in his family, whatever's historical is not important in their family. They are who they are. They are completely free to self-define in their own personal scale. So they are not like they don't have in their identity this, oh, I am a descendant of whoever. No, no, no. They are completely particular and free personally. And but Alejandra, because of her training, of course, she can see the incredibly and very impactful presence and like very precise intervention of that architect, Justo José de Urquiza. So this is like really interesting for Alejandra. Like she loves that her attention was completely caught by that. Because each scale preserves its own creation of meaning. Because every person in relation with the container participates in an harmonic configuration, but they remain in their own lane. They participate in an harmonic configuration for the container, but they have their own lane, right? They have their own criteria, they have their own scopes, and they don't invade the personal scale of anybody else, and they don't invade the clan. So she thinks this is wonderful. She's learning a lot about that. And it's wonderful for us that she learns about the molecular scale because she's going to teach us all about it. Um, so she continues talking about that. Oh, she's saying that in her house on that day, on the 25th of July, in her house she lived a very happy day because she's doing work in her house, and she's saying that everybody was doing their thing, like the worker, the electrician, the plumber, they were all doing things, and everybody was completely laxed, completely in their own lane, and everybody was doing whatever they were supposed to be doing. Like she didn't have to tell anybody what to do. Everybody was doing what they were supposed to be doing. So she said that it was a really happy day for her on that day. So she says that she's really happy that this March of the Toganeson that happened in Event 71 is vibrating in real life, and it's including the personal scale, but it is including it as the last link, because if she had placed the personal life like in front of everything, we wouldn't have reached the personal scale in laxed, and we wouldn't have this symphonic synchronicity. We wouldn't have if the partials are operating first, we would never have the neutral, right? And when we are making framework contracts, it is the neutrals that are operating. So the fourth cardinality is a cardinality for regulation. Um, so in the solar algorithm, and she says solar, not lunar. We're not messing things up here. Just solar, pure solar algorithm. We need to uh, prioritize the electric aspect of the octave, because the magnetic is provided by the collective documentation. So we need to learn how to prioritize the electric aspect of the antenna. Um, Now she says that she is very happy because she knows that the comprehension of every concept and the instruction is adjusting and it's working and it's doing really well. And that when she says that we should leave a concept loose, she knows that that's uncomfortable. That it is uncomfortable to let somebody leave these concepts loose. She knows, right? Because we are used to operate under memory and under control. So it kind of scares us a little bit. But in that loose, being able to let things loose, it is resonance that helps us, because resonance is a signal that makes me doubt of whatever happened in the memories, because I am able to capture a new variable that is going to be added to the equation. It's going to modify the equation. So it's going to be resonance, the one that is going to be helping me let things loose, because resonance allows me to capture this new variable and include it in the equation, so that the equation can be modified. And that is what nourishing the interpreter is about. Okay. Um, Whew, how's everyone? Good. You want to continue? Mm-hmm. We have like, let's see. Oh, we have like three more. It's not too much. I think we can make it.
You are quick.
Yeah, because we don't have too much time. So I was like, but it's clear, or is it too fast?
I do
I think,
have to listen to
yeah,
it.
yeah. The good thing is that it's recorded. You guys can go over
Yeah,
it
that's
slowly.
perfect. A lot of things
But
were really, really interesting. Like, okay, I want to go through that again, but
yeah,
that's possible, so
even
that's great.
like me too, while I am
Yeah.
doing it, I'm like, wow, that's like really there's like a lot to unpack there. But at the same time, like we already have the new red program. So it is like
Yeah.
that is a good example of how the RAM memory works. Like according to our different scopes in our RAM memory, it's like online what we are able to absorb, right? And then move on to whatever the instruction has there for us. Um, but the good thing is that we have the recording and we can go through it again
Yeah.
slowly. Okay. All right. So intuition operates as a delay for the observer. Intuition operates as a delay for the observer because it is registering again. Instinct is something that has already been registered. Instinct is something that allows us to registrate again. Okay? So because that's intuition, sorry. Because instinct operates under a memory and memory has an included fourth cardinality. So it's really quick. When we have an instinct, when we operate by instinct is like really quickly. When we are operating by intuition, there's a delay, right? Because there's no fourth cardinality included. The thing is that if we are all operating under the instinct, when the space-temporal proposal changes into the fifth dimension, the variables change so brutally and the logic changes so brutally that that is destructive, right? We cannot operate only by instinct because everything is changing so brutally. So the digital era is like, okay, you have to activate your antenna, and that is going to be something mute. Right now, intuition is more important than instinct. Because if we follow instinct, all I'm going to be doing is projecting into the other all of my fears. I am going to be projecting, I am not going to be registering. If I am able to registrate instead of projecting, things change radically. But for that, I need the neutral, which is not to erase the memory. It is not to erase the memory. It is neutralizing the impact of the memory on the observer. The neutral is neutralizing the impact of the memory on the observer. So it's not to erase the memory. All of this is exercise. You can exercise this, you can train, and that was a little bit of the theme of event 72. So she discovered this variable about Justo José de Urquiza very recently. And she says that number 81748 expresses exactly what the logic was synchronizing into, right? So in LGC, it is not about mathematics, what's important, it is the thematic. So we have the thematic first, and then the mathematics validate what the logic was trying to synchronize into. Okay, so it is the logic, it's prior to the number. Mhm. Here she's saying that her role is to create improvements in the instruction. But for her to be able to create improvements in the instruction, she needs feedback, which is why she has been meeting with people personally, right? Because she needs to know how the concepts are being registered and received. So, she knows that because this is interdimensional, the progression of the concepts is guaranteed year by year because we are um, being guided by an external source that is providing an instruction at a subatomic scale, right? Um, because the instruction is for Sol. But if I am not a solar actor from an actor from the subatomic scale, antimatter, pure antimatter, if I am not a solar actor, I will not be able to create the regulations for materialization. I will not be able to dominate the code. I cannot fulfill my task as a solar consciousness, which is to create solar code. Um, I am using a body from the anatomic scale that moves, speaks, breathes, but the logic that we are expressing does not need to be in the neurology because it is not an analogic logic. It is a subatomic logic. It doesn't need all of that. And then Ale says she doesn't think when she speaks, right? Because if she thinks, that means that she's using a unit of memory, a collective unit memory. And that's another type of function. And she says that she's not very good at that. But she says that these are all different scales that she needs to conquer, right? Um, Okay, so the perception of someone else who isn't me, how the other person perceives, how the other person acts, I have to register that in this update of perception. And I have to understand the other today, this year, not last year, because last year we are all phantoms. Like none of us are the same person we were last year. We have to read each other how we are right now. And next year, she's like, "Oh, I'm not even going to tell you about next year because the mutation factor of the collective memory will be to the max. So the changes will be to the max. So if the mutation of the collective memory will be to the max, that's going to leave us in a position where the antenna will be more and more necessary each day, and the memory will be more fragile each day. Okay, so in that observing each other, how the other one perceives, we will be detecting an affinity, and in base of that affinity, we're going to be interacting or functioning together. Because all of the frictions that are happening are the expressions of the personal scale, right? The personal scale, one personal scale with another personal scale generates friction. That is completely natural. The thing is that authenticity is a mandatory parameter from now on. It will not be optional. It is mandatory authenticity. So, can something not be perfect? Yes. But what it cannot be is not authentic. Because the criteria, the transparency criteria will be increasing. The criteria for transparency will be increasing, right? And it's going to be more relevant to be authentic than to appear to be authentic. Because before, to appear something, that was the king of everything. Well, all of that is going to be deactivated. So this authenticity will be mutating the field continuously at extraordinary speeds. She's using speed or velocity. This authenticity will be mutating the field continuously at extraordinary velocities. Another thing is that the 13th of August, Alcides Carrion anniversary, right? We know that this is a Peruvian medic who injected himself the virus to be able to cure it from inside, but he didn't do it. He couldn't make it. And we know that what failed in Alcides Carrion, not in Alcides Carrion, but in the code was the parameter 39, which was the structure of the quarantine, which is what allows us to update. Okay, so authenticity is king now, okay? Do you have a conflict with authenticity? Authenticity, you need to go to therapy. Do you have a problem with exposition? Do you have a problem with shame? Well, you need to go to therapy because there's going to be no place to save anything, to hide. There's going to be no place to hide anything anymore. And that is the wonder of freedom. These variables of the container that she's naming have to do with lab 14, where everything can be expressed simultaneously because the table is prepared and the solar code is prepared. So, more than anything, she is very happy to share how beautiful all of these things are presenting themselves, all these variables, and maybe for the collective, this happiness that she has, it's an anticipated happiness, but it is something that tells us that there is trust, that Alejandra has this sense of trust on everything that has been prepared. So she's happy about that. Um, so here she talks about we need to regulate more on the laxed and not on the tense, right? Because if we're prioritizing resistance, we are working on the tense. But if we're prioritizing resonance, we are working on the laxed. So, because now the field enters in a pure digital era, the lax are going to be receiving all of the frictions of the tense, right? And this is going to generate a regulation of the field. Um, the thing is that in these new regulations, the roles are going to be shifting because we enter into new qualifications. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the roles are shifting. I am seeing this very clearly. There are new challenges in the field because before appearances was there was prices for how good you could hide yourself. Now that's going to be the place of authenticity. We're going to be experiencing that. Okay, so next emission, 13th of August, frequency 225, -141, and that was 2 days ago. Um, Red program 142 and lab 15. So, we were able to go through this like this because what I do is I grab the transcript that they do normally, and then I clean it up because they have all these, images and all these separations. Like they translate exactly like if Alejandra does, oh, no, yes, they transcribe all of that. So I I make an extraction of like, all the juices and then I kind of like just crunch it like that. So for me, I that allows me to focus. It allows me to concentrate on the juices, right? So yeah. How do you guys feel? Sorry. I'm sorry if I went a little too fast. You
It
can
was
you can shift the velocity when you rewatch it.
really interesting. I think you did a great job again. Yes, really, thank you. Yeah,
Sorry for being late. I it
no
just came
problem at
late.
all.
But we made it even before. Like we usually end at 1:30 or
Yeah,
at
true.
9:30. Yeah.
Very true.
Glad that we could go through this one, even though it's the lab before we're now in.
Yeah, I know.
Always
And
nice. Yeah.
yeah, because the transcription came out a little late, but I that really does help me because now I have to deal with so many things that I wasn't dealing with last year. And this year I have
Mm.
to deal with like I am in the unified, like I'm inserted in the unified field and I have new demands of the context. So now I
Yeah.
have to organize my time completely different than I did before. Like I don't have that much availability as I did.
Yeah.
So the transcriptions really help me to
Mhm.
to do all of this. Yeah.
For me, it's very clear at this new way of presenting and give this presentation. It's very clear for me.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah.
yeah.
And you see how it just it happens naturally. Like I don't plan it. you know, how, oh, I am gonna, like, I don't think about how the format and how it's gonna happen. I just find the way to, so that I can continue to do it. Because if I, you know, put myself into a box that I have to do it this way, then I
Mm-hmm.
probably wouldn't continue doing it, you know?
Yeah.
So because of the changes that I have been experiencing and all the new demands, then I'm like, okay, I have to find a way that it is possible for me to continue doing it. And, you know, just different. It's just different. But I am glad it continues to work. I'm happy about that.
Mm. Thanks very
Well,
much for your time.
no, thank
Yes,
you
thank you.
guys. Thank you guys for being here and just being there. It's really great. It's really great. So yeah, we will wait for the next transcription and we'll meet again soon. You have meeting with David and the cycle, right? This lap, and then the next one is with me.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be seeing each other.
Thank you
Okay.
very
Thank
much.
you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Bye bye,
guys. See
ladies.
you
Bye
later.
bye. Thank
Bye.